Okay, this is the vlog for September 1st, 2018. New month. I'm still in a hotel room. Uh, Today is the first day of PAX, the Penny Arcade Expo, which has grown to be this huge video game show off, showcase thing uh, that is set apart from E3 as being fan oriented instead of press oriented. E3 is very much supposed to be a trade show where video game developers and designers and publishers are engaging each other rather than and the press rather than sort of engaging the very people who are going to be buying their games. Um, Even so, I've never really gone. I think I told the story of how I picked up somebody from that I met in World of Warcraft. I was only there for about an hour. But what's sort of odd is today, actually this week, I've been offered three, on three different occasions, tickets to PAX, two of which were going to be free. They weren't even going to sell me the tickets. And I'm just not super enthusiastic about going to these conventions. It's not like it's not that they're bad conventions, um, but I'm just not the most convention-y person. The one convention that I like going to is SakuraCon, which I skipped this year due to scheduling stuff not lining up super well. Um, but I definitely have this desire to go and do that next year. What I did do today, instead of going to PAX, was to pick up this stuff. This is a little bit silly. So, what it is it's it's miniature furniture, and I know it's a little bit dollhouse for a guy who's 37 years old, but I sort of want to tell a story about that. I'm big into gaming. I'm big into even tabletop gaming, or at least I was. I used to work at a game store that sold a lot of tabletop game stuff, like Dungeons and Dragons, Warhammer, Warhammer 40,000, and a host of others. It was Wizkids games, so of course our biggest merchandise that we tried to move was the Mage Knight game at first, and then HeroClix when that was released, and eventually the MechWarrior game when that came out. The last thing that Wizkids released when I was working there was, I don't even remember what it was called, but it was essentially a 3D model version of like Garbage Pail Kids. They were little monsters that you basically played it like as if each chess piece had its own specific rules for interacting with the chessboard and how it could move and interact with other pieces. It was an interesting concept that didn't really work well for the same reason Garbage Pail Kids cards never really worked well, is because kids don't have the money to buy this stuff. They get their money from their parents. And most parents have at least some interest in what their kids are consuming. And if your kid told you they wanted money to buy figures of a barf monster and a figure representative of a silent but deadly fart, you might be hesitant to hand over the cash for that. So it didn't help that when we were trying to peddle this mistake, they had a 5-minute video looping constantly on a VCR, playing in the store to try and boost sales. Shockingly, that didn't help very much, and what it did do is it drove all of us to quit. We'd also had some trouble with the way the store had been managed at the time, and the 5-minute video for a game none of us liked and didn't think anybody was going to want was the last straw. So we all quit basically at the same time. I ended up being kind of late to the party, so I quit 1 week after everybody else. So it was left to me to train a replacement for most of the staff. And I did an okay job of that. I didn't really care. And it sounded like the replacement didn't have a very good time of it either. And that store eventually closed down completely. It didn't close down. It was bought by a different company called Games and Gizmos, which had previously owned the space, stopped renting it, and then bought it back when we were done with it. Games and Gizmos, sadly, has also closed down after they moved a few times. They just never found a space that was affordable enough for the amount of money they were able to make in this age of digital games and digital distribution. It's sort of sad because Dungeons & Dragons is now enjoying this remarkable period of success in no small part due to things like Twitch and Critical Role, where people can watch other people playing Dungeons & Dragons and get inspired and have fun. Sometimes people don't even play the game, they just enjoy watching other people play the game, which isn't great from a business standpoint, but sometimes they even buy the books even if they never intend to play. In fact, the number of books I've bought for role-playing games without ever actually playing them is substantial. Yeah, furniture. Stuff like this, or my personal favorite, a whole little carded box, this is carded, of wizard accoutrements. Basically stacks of books and crystal balls and vials and a skull with a candle in it. All primed and ready for painting if I ever decide to paint. I even bought a pair of doors. I think I could probably stand to buy a few more. These are the heaviest things. I think this feels weightier than this whole box does. My dad, when I was really young, like 8 or 7 years old, had a scale model train set up in our basement in Minnesota. And I had never even considered model trains. Trains for me, model trains for me were Brio. They were little wooden toys designed for 3 and 4 year olds, and I was pretty much moving past that in my tastes when my dad showed me his model trains. But it was so interesting to see this miniaturized world. Basically, my dad had been working towards building an entire city. He had little buildings that he'd made out of like balsa wood, little trees that he got at a miniature shop, tiny cars, and of course the trains and the train tracks themselves, all on this styrofoam sort of hill with a flat area that you could put the tracks on, and flocked green with fake turf. And I thought it was so cool. It's really probably the genesis for my interest in model kits in general. But there's something about the extraordinary detail that can go into, like this set, for example, which, funny enough, made by Wizkids, the company that I used to work for. Although it's been sold since I worked for it, so it's probably not really the same company anymore. It's a subsidiary of NECA now. It used to be owned by Topps Baseball Cards, I thought. But these are sort of modular, so these shelves can be filled with drawers or cupboard doors or actual shelves with books. There's even a staircase to climb up the tall ones to get the books on the top shelf. Very, well thought out, extraordinarily well constructed. But the best thing about these is the price. Wizkids tried to sell sort of miniature accessories when I worked there for their Mage Knight line. And you were looking at castle wall sections that had their little clicky base patented designs built into them. Each wall piece was itself like $35 to $50, including a bunch of little exchangeable things to like joint pieces so you could join them together. But we took one look at that and we were just like, no one's going to buy this stuff for this amount of money. If you cut the price by half, maybe. Now, those wall sections were fully painted. They had more than one color. They were sort of white stone, gray stone with gold trim and little details like, I think, green ivy along one side. So, some work had been put in. These, on the other hand, are obviously unprimed, or they're primed only, but they're unpainted, so you're meant to paint them yourself so that they look more like this. And I think that's just a better business model. I'm certainly buying up quite a bit of it. Oh, and because most of my dice right now are blue, I decided to buy some more dice that were slightly different color. These are, well, despite looking blue in the screen right now, they're actually much more purple. And these, of course, are pink and black, which is a color combination I actually really like. Makes me think of 80s punk stuff. But that's been my day, contemplating going to PAX, not going, and instead buying miniature furniture. Oh, what a life I live. The air conditioning in here is very loud. Anyway, that's it for me. I'm Eric Spornitz, and tomorrow will be better.